Ready to make the next big hotel deal? Join nearly 3,000 global leaders at the 25th annual ALICE. As the world's leading and most influential hotel investment conference, ALICE takes place January 26 through 28, 2026 at the JW Marriott and Ritz-Carlton LA Live. With more than 40 powerhouse sessions and 150 industry visionaries on stage, this is where the future of hotel investment takes shape. Visit aliceconference.com for more information.
Everyone, I am Sean McCracken, news editor here at CoStar News Hotels, joined today on our podcast with HSMAI's Brian Hicks, and Horwath, amongst other things, is Dorothy Dowling. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great, Sean.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be here and look forward to some really good conversations around talent.
Likewise.
So obviously that's the topic of the day. Reached out to you guys because HSMAI last month put out the State of Talent report put together by Dorothy specifically, and you guys highlighted 9 specific takeaways. Not surprisingly, a lot of it kind of tech focused. So I'll start with you, Dorothy. What when putting this together, kind of describing the state of talent in the various fields that HSMAI covers, a lot of the, traditionally commercial fields. What was your big takeaway? What was your feeling after doing all of this work?
Well, I think it's really about the inflection point that the industry is at right now, Sean, and that obviously AI is reshaping so much of the work that we do. So it really is around us upskilling and reskilling and embracing a lot of that technical change so that we can be at our best. And then it's also just the interdisciplinary need for all of the commercial disciplines to not only be investing in AI, but working collaboratively in terms of really optimizing our performance together. So it's teamwork, and then it's really a lot of the technical shift that is just changing the dynamics of our work.
And you organize this as kind of 9 key takeaways, which, like I was just mentioning before we hit the record button, is super useful for me to make it easy to break down and talk about. So let's start at the beginning. To no one's surprise, AI rose to the top of the list, right?
Absolutely. So to me, it's just the underpinnings of how AI is really reshaping work. I don't think it changes the human element. Humans will continue to remain the heart of hospitality, but it is for us to understand how it's empowering all of us in terms of garnering information, understanding customer acquisition, customer activation, and really how we optimize the revenue side of the business in terms of really pricing strategies and making sure that we're securing the right length of stay from each customer segment that we are supporting from our hoteliers, the owners of the assets.
And Brian, across kind of the HSMAI membership, what are you seeing in this regard?
Yeah, I think one of the things that really stuck out for me is the training element. Um, you know, at HSMAI, we've always been focused on certification, the education that goes behind it, really empowering those individuals that have, experience within our industry. And I think AI is going to provide an even greater platform for faster, more, I think it's going to be stickier for people as they start to train and go through education. I think it's going to land a lot better. And then they're going to have a resource that they can fall back on should they need to. For a refresher, et cetera. So again, this is a huge enabler of individuals that are either just starting their careers or maybe they've been in it for a long time and maybe they got a little rusty on a couple of areas. And it's a
Yeah.
great way to refresh and just stay on top of it. And I think that's a huge enabler. And hopefully that's going to attract more people to our industry. We need to attract, everybody's in a little bit of a war for talent, but we've had some challenges over the past few years that have made few people that probably would love this industry maybe a little bit skeptical. And I really think AI is going to be able to show them there's some really interesting, fascinating elements of this industry that you can learn them, you can grow your career. You don't need to have a massive doctorate degree or anything like that to get into this industry. So I look at it as a huge enabler of training, certification, and just education, period.
And obviously that ties to, the big post-pandemic concern when, all the corporate entities across the hotel industry were laying people off, or just the general feeling of things not being as stable, that there's this worry that there's kind of a brain drain to, because so many of the commercial strategies, really the skill sets could jump to any number of industries, right?
I absolutely. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest selling points of this industry. If you have a degree in HR, or even if you're in mechanical, whatever your background might be, there is absolutely a place within our industry where you can bring those skills and have a really fruitful career.
And I think on the counterpoint to that, Sean, is that to me it's a great place to start your career because I just think the breadth and scope of the kinds of exposure that you're going to have will empower you to have a career journey within the industry or potentially use that as a launching pad to other opportunities and other verticals.
So to the point that you guys are making, the second kind of trend here you guys are identifying, or upskilling, reskilling for, retention and mobility. How are people accomplishing that right now? Or are we not doing a good enough job as an industry at that particular topic?
Well, my point of view is that I think it's incumbent on every individual to own that learning journey. I think curiosity and
Hmm.
learning are really the currency that we all need to embrace in terms of our career mobility. But I do think, to Brian's point, HSMAI has always been that remarkable connector for me, and I know for many of my peers, and that it has been sort of the conduit for peer networking, which have always empowered all of us to learn from each other. But it also is just a substantial knowledge base, that it is a repository of so much of category capabilities that it is that great referral source for us to have as our go to.
So, not to belabor any points, because you got so much good stuff in here, I want to move at kind of a quick clip. But it is interesting. The next point is kind of talking about how the workforce in the industry is so multi-generational now. I feel like, when we're talking about building careers and, reskilling and upskilling, that's probably something that needs to be kept in mind, right?
For sure, because our lifespans are gonna be well into the 90s for the most part, so we're gonna have a much
Knock
longer
on
career
wood.
journey than many of us anticipated. So I do think lifelong learning is an imperative that we all have to own, Sean, in terms of delivering value back to our employers and our customers.
For sure. So, Brian, as an organization, HSMAI, so much of that work falls on you guys. How do you kind of target learning for such a wide swath of professionals?
We rely on our membership base, to be honest. They are the experts. Our advisory boards are just an all-star cast of individuals within the industry, and they're so giving with their time to help us craft all of our messages, craft our commercial strategy conference, which is really gained in huge momentum over the past few years in terms of bringing together revenue management, sales, digital marketing all together in one place. The advisory boards for each of those three disciplines help us to put that entire agenda together. And they are in it day after day after day. They're experiencing these challenges firsthand. So they're coming to us and saying, hey, here's a big topic, here's a big challenge. Here's somebody who has a really good insight, or they've made some changes in their organization that have really impacted these areas in an extremely positive way. Let's take those learnings, share those with our membership base, and help them as they kind of help their careers. It is such a great think tank of individuals within our advisory boards, as well as our America's board and our foundation board, and they just bring us so much content. We could probably put on a 3 week conference. We have that many ideas and different suggestions on topics, but we will focus on the ones that have the highest attention, that probably have the biggest challenges for our members, and bring that back to them. That's just been in place for quite some time, and it's just a really great team that helps us, kind of make sure we're staying on top of those issues.
And I do remember specifically being at the last commercial strategy week in Indianapolis, that kind of talking across generations was a big focus of the content
Yeah, for sure.
of the event.
We had some of our young advisory committee members that were part of that panel, Sean, and I think Brian framed it up beautifully, and I do think it is harnessing, the digital fluency of the Gen Zs, but then it's the wisdom workers of the baby boomers and some of the older millennials. I just think it's the power of all of those generations bringing their expertise and wisdom together, and we mentor each other. It's reverse mentoring, and it is traditional mentoring.
So our next topic here kind of switches gears, but it's something I'm curious to hear more from you guys about, because obviously, so the bullet point here in the report says leadership defines culture and organizational purpose. And I feel like culture is something this industry talks about a lot, but it's so amorphous and it's so kind of hard to get your arms around. So what do you guys see as the role of culture, and what do you see as the role of leaders actually, putting out this is our culture?
Go ahead, Dorothy.
Well, I just think talent, I was making decisions in terms of what organizations to join based on the leaders that they get to work with and for. So I do think that leaders really establish the collaborative nature of what talent is looking for. And I do think they want to be purposeful about the time that they invest in their careers. And I do think they want to be part of teams that are making a difference. So when we talk about leadership, it is, I think, that new old of the EQ factor in terms of really bringing all of that breadth of emotional intelligence as well as the business intelligence that drives performance.
Yeah, the thing I would add is when we think about leadership and we think about the generations, the multi generations that are working within our industry, it really puts even more pressure on leadership to ensure that they are talking about the culture, that they're living the culture, that they're calling out good behavior where they see it. If we think back to just go back to our previous conversation around AI and how that's taking a lead in kind of developing. I think the leadership skills is that one area that I don't think AI is going to help us with, pure emotional intelligence with our teams as a leader. And so when I think about, HSMAI and our gatherings, whether it be our roundtable discussions or, our curate environments, et cetera, that is where leaders are sharing really good best practices in person, and that's not going to go away. I think that's, we talk about not trying to harp on the commercial strategy conference, but that is such a great opportunity for leaders to gather, share best practices, share their learning, share how they're dealing with all of these changes that are coming into our industry. And that's the one thing when we think about leadership, AI is not going to help. I mean, it's not the pure, real, true leadership
Yeah.
that people need to learn in this industry. So I think that's, we talk about leadership a lot. I think there's, people need to go after it in a little bit different ways.
Yeah. I mean, the old idiom is that people don't quit companies, they quit
The
bosses,
boss,
right?
for sure.
So, along those lines, the next topic is actually about emotional wellness. So, it seems like that kind of lends itself to the leadership side of the coin too. How do you see kind of the modern hotel company approaching that wellness and mental well being aspect?
I think we're still early in our journey in terms of mental wellness, Sean, because I think many of us have more of a traditional view on it. I do think it's a very sobering factor that we have to recognize that some of it has obviously become much more evident post COVID. But the reality is that emotional intelligence that leaders bring to the job and the understanding and working with their teammates in such a collaborative way and helping them achieve their career dreams as well as what's important to them on a day-to-day basis is critically important. But it is a very sobering reality that the isolation of COVID still exists. And so we have to build that teamwork and some of the social skills that have been lost by some of the younger generations and that they just haven't had some of the exposure that maybe many of us had early in our career. And so some of them need some very fundamental development in some of those areas. So leaders have to bring that to the table and model it, invest in it, support it, and understand their team's needs and be open to collaborating with them.
To that point, I do hear I've heard a lot from, kind of, you know, higher leaders in this industry that younger people are coming in with a different kind of social mindset, a different social skill set than they had. But at the same time, is it not true too that, like, the more senior leaders in this industry have kind of had to learn a new style of leadership that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, I'm a journalist, so my career before this was in newspapers, not the hotel industry. But I remember the way when I was very young working in newspapers, the way I was talked to by editors when my copy was not particularly great was a little more severe than, the young people that I've worked with in this role. And I kind of had to retrain my brain to think like, well, that's not good or bad. The fact that I need to communicate something needs to change in a little softer way than I would have gotten. Like, that's not necessarily like a failing of theirs. Honestly, in some ways, I think that, like, the young people I've worked with have been more receptive to, like, my feedback than I might have been because I wasn't, feeling quite so argumentative about the time. I mean, there's a give and a take, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the younger generation is not afraid to speak up and speak their mind,
Mhm.
and what they're thinking and what they're feeling, and that absolutely, I think, has taken a lot of leaders by surprise, and they've had to change. They've absolutely had to kind of change their mindset, change their emotional intelligence as to the way that they're going to go after these issues and problems. Hearing young kids that are extremely stressed, or they've got a lot of anxiety about work, from an older generation that might not land exactly the way they had intended it to. So I think it is imperative that there is a level of understanding and a bit more openness. And I think one of the other really big challenges that ties into wellness, it's a challenge for the hotel industry because it's about fractional work, and it's a challenge for the industry because of scheduling, and it's a physical job, it's a physical workplace. So there's not a lot of opportunities to work from home, with the few exceptions. And the hotels that are really embracing that are seeing the benefits, and they're seeing the benefits of allowing people to work 25, 30 hours a week if that's what they're looking for, and then turn around and 3 weeks later they want to work extra time. I mean, it's just kind of the ebbs and flows, and people, and their emotional ability to show up at work, be themselves, and do their best. And we just need to be flexible in that sense, and I think it'll pay off dramatically.
Yeah, I'll use that as the opportunity to just note the next couple of bullet points we got here are both kind of built around that idea of flexibility with, the level of hybrid work and also, fractional staffing gig economy. Dorothy, how do you kind of synthesize all that?
Well, I do think that fractional labor or workforce is a strategic differentiator for companies. It allows them to get the level of talent that they need to solve particular problems. And I think to Brian's point, it also fills a need of what some individuals want in terms of their balance, in terms of their life commitment. So I do think it's a win win, but it also, I think, allows everyone to develop their career in the way they wish. I
Yeah.
also think that it allows the owners a different way to pay for really exceptional talent, because I do think what has happened at the unit level in particular is they can't afford the kind of talent that they need to really drive the business outcomes. But to be able to hire someone on a fractional basis that brings that strategic commercial capability to really drive performance allows them to achieve that, and then maybe have other teammates do some of the lifting that maybe that role used to have as part of its responsibility areas before. So I do think that's a change. I do think it's a change of also this generational, and that there's lots of people that are older that are going to work, but they don't necessarily want a full-time gig, but they are quite happy to work maybe, as Brian said, 20 or 30 hours a week in a way that they can contribute, but on their own terms.
And as Brian mentioned, obviously, there's so many roles in this industry where you have to be there. There's no getting around that. But there's also, you know, a lot of the times for, the white collar professional roles, there is some flexibility that you don't always have to be on property. And a lot of the times, um, corporate level jobs, you're a revenue manager overseeing a bunch of hotels in a region, like you literally can't be there every day. So the hybrid part of it is probably not going away.
Yeah, no, the digital and revenue management and even fractional sales allows for a lot of work to be done remotely. And that has also been the change in terms of hybrid work in general, is that salespeople can't necessarily meet people in office
Hmm.
environments anymore. So that's where trade
Yeah.
shows and other ways are much more important from sort of the strategic business evolution. So I do think the flexibility that Brian referenced earlier is being empowered by the macro environment, but it also is around thinking about our employees as customers, and we have to meet them where they're at in terms of what they
Yeah.
want to contribute.
The interesting, and I will say completely coincidental thing about what you just said is I'm 100% certain that a couple of years ago when I was at the commercial strategy conference, I ran into, a few people that I knew there just chatting about, they're mentioning how their whole team was there because they never see each other. So they used that as their opportunity to kind of like all get together for themselves, not just to see other people in the industry, but to get together as a group, as a company, and have some face-to-face time because it was kind of in short supply that especially a couple of years ago.
Well, and I think that's also true for the HDC conference too, Sean, is that a lot of
Well, thank you
teammates
for that
are
plug.
investing in that for exactly the same reason.
And I will admit we do have kind of a crossover with some of the attendance, but veers off in certain ways. So the next topic we wanted to talk about is employee engagement. So Dorothy, what are the trends in this area?
Well, they're a little frightening, Sean. We're at on a macro level, we're at the lowest level of employee engagement that we've ever had in our history. And a lot of it is trust, is that employees don't necessarily trust their employer and they don't necessarily trust their first line leaders. And I think that goes back to the way Brian was framing up. It is the leader's responsibility to bridge some of that trust and to invest in relationship engagement. But we have to re earn a lot of that trust for employees, and we do have to meet them where they're at because they come with a different mindset. So we do have to understand that talent is a key differentiator in success, and they are a market to be cultivated. And the real winners are those that are going to win talent, grow talent, and retain talent. So that's what this
Yeah.
whole signature report is about HSMAI, is that talent is a differentiator, and people will either win or lose based on the leaders that are going to cultivate that
Yeah.
talent.
And obviously, I mean, you don't have to look too far with, this idea that talent is the differentiator. Just look, when you're speaking of AI, look at how much money the big tech companies
Yes.
are spending for top AI talent. I mean, they think it's valuable.
For sure.
Yeah, I've spent most of my career really focused on employee engagement. It's always been probably the top thing, consistently in the top three things that I've had to focus on throughout my career in various roles, in various regions, et cetera. And it's always paid off, always. When you see, big jumps, big improvement in employee engagement. It absolutely translates to higher productivity, better collaboration, and just overall happiness of employees. It is
100%.
absolutely critical. I had one experience where I took over a team and I was shocked at how low the engagement scores were. They were done twice a year at that time, and it really I almost I almost quit because of, like, there's just and then I realized there's only one way to go, and that is up. And it was, my boss at the time had said, "It's gonna be really difficult, to get past X level," and, I made a commitment to do it, and I hit it. I blew it out of the water, and it just, I look back at that team, and yeah, we had to make a couple of changes, but wow, what a night and day difference in productivity and just, again, just overall happiness of employees wanting to come to work.
Yeah, I mean, happiness as a business metric probably should be talked about more, right?
Agree.
And we would cure the
So,
mental health issues at the same time if we could do that,
well,
Sean.
maybe not cure, but at least alleviate, right?
Yes,
Right.
right. Better said.
So, so if anyone who's been paying attention to the industry and specifically, revenue, sales, marketing, should not be surprised by the last bullet point. noted here as cross-functional teamwork and the evolution of commercial. I mean, kind of this idea of a commercial team has really been top of the to-do list across the industry for a few years now, right?
Yeah,
For sure, I think
absolutely.
the silos have, and I think HSMAI has been a really important community of really facilitating a lot of that capability for people to get some grounding in some of the other disciplines so they can connect the dots. I think everyone will have sort of their where they grew, their initial part of their career, but it is a
Yeah,
responsibility for all of us to understand how the dots connect and how we amplify each of those disciplines through some of our core discipline skill sets. So, but I have just seen in my journey, my career journey, how this has really taken flight, and it is a responsibility of those leaders again to really encourage some of that cross collaboration and learning across the various disciplines.
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. It's been it's been interesting to see the evolution of core structures with whether it be the big brands, larger management companies, but you're starting to see, roles being posted that might have two of the three disciplines included in their remit and their responsibility. And then, of course, you see, chief commercial officers through pretty much all the major brands and management companies today. So there's definitely the recognition that this is something that needs to happen and that it all needs to be under one umbrella. I think where it gets tricky and where we're trying to put some definition to is if I am in sales, what do I need to know about marketing and revenue management and just vice versa through all of those? There's a really good analogy of, the three disciplines need to be on the same highway. Sometimes you're going to change lanes just to get around things, but you need to you'll get back into your lane, but you're all still going in the same direction and you've got the same destination in mind. And I think that really kind of summarizes it. So, you got to realize, you got to know when to, when to stay in your lane and when to get into the other lane and really understand
absolutely.
what's happening there. And I think people are seeing that more and more. And that's certainly, the definition of our commercial strategy conference. Now we're bringing all three of those disciplines together. They wanted to come together. They didn't want to have separate conferences and meetings and events. It's like, no, we're all in this together. So
Yeah.
bring us all together.
And for those who don't know or don't remember, it wasn't that long ago that it literally was three separate conferences with three different audiences, and now it's joined together as one. I will note one last selfish plug for our individual conferences. It is at the last Hotel Data Conference, I actually moderated a discussion about kind of the evolution of commercial strategy. And that was a moment where I had to kind of remind myself, for as much as we talk about it in this industry, um, about half I did a quick informal poll, at the start of the session, and about half the people in there said that they're still kind of the old way of doing things, the
Yeah.
siloed way of doing things. So it's a reminder that as important as it is, as huge as the leaps and jumps are made, there's still a lot of catching up to do for a lot of this industry.
Well, it's an investment in learning, Sean, and I think everyone that's the other part of leaders is that they have to allow some space for people to have time to invest in their own learning because I do think a lot of individuals are maxed out in their roles. They're working big hours just to get their jobs done. So we've got to be mindful that learning is part of what we all need to do to be effective.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Always good to talk to you, Sean.
Yeah. Great to see you, Sean. Thanks a lot. This is great, great discussion.
I'm Terence Baker, News Editor, Europe, Middle East and Africa, and I'm the host of The Upgrade, a CoStar News Hotels podcast for the EMEA region. In it, I discuss with special guests the pressures, challenges, joys and exhilaration that comes with managing, owning and developing hotels in our glorious multifaceted industry. Discovering the EMEA region from the scenic northern shores of Norway to the heights of Table Mountain in South Africa, and most likely some chat about birdwatching, distance running and the English Premiership. Join us wherever you find your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify and on other platforms.
This episode of the CoStar News Hotels podcast was recorded on December 8th, 2025 and edited by me, Sean McCracken. Look for all of our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or your platform of choice, and find more of our coverage every day at costar.com/hotelnews.